all that, I forgot to log. Well, I did. Floor is yours, Erica.
All right, perfect. Well, we'll give everyone a little bit more time to join. Thanks to everyone for joining thus far. We're going to get started really soon because we've got a packed agenda and we're super excited to get everyone started. So welcome, welcome. And for new folks who are just joining the call, as you may have heard, Meredith is on mat leave, so congrats to Meredith. So I'll be leading today's session today as we get some more people who have joined us. We'll give it just a few more minutes. We want to be super prompt today. All right, hello everyone who is joining. Thanks for joining us this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are in the world today. We'll give it one more minute and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get started just because we've got a jam-packed, tight 45 minutes today. So for everyone who's new to joining the call, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Erica Raber-Jacobs. I work with Meredith Pierce and some of the other folks on our leadership team for Oceanforce. We are so excited today because we have an awesome team here to deliver some amazing content. Really quick, just high level, what we're gonna be doing today is chatting with not only the team from the International Ocean Film Fest, but also some film directors and creators of some content. So I'll be introducing the executive director of the program, but just a high level overview of what we're doing today. We're gonna be watching the film. We'll also be getting an introduction to the Film Fest as well. And then we'll be getting to do Q&A and talk directly to the filmmakers and content creators and all the awesome folks out there who are making this content for us to enjoy. So without further ado, we will go ahead and get started introducing Ana Blanco, who is the executive director of the annual International Ocean Film Fest. I believe they just did the 19th and are looking forward to many more years in the future. So she already told me the dates for next year and I wrote them down as a Film Fest nerd. So I'm super excited to hear a little bit more about it and learn more about the program moving forward. So I'm gonna pass it off to her and then we'll get started with the content for today.
Thank you so much, Erica. We're excited to be here and thank you for inviting us to show our films and participate in Oceanforce. Thanks to Maggie Seidel for bringing us to the table as well. So the film festival is actually celebrating 19 years this coming April. And the dates are April 7 to 10. We'll be in person here at Cowell Theater at Fort Mason in San Francisco. We typically get about 5,000 people over the weekend. We have amazing films. We do Q&A panels, lots of parties because film festivals love parties. And it's just a great opportunity and a great platform for people to come and talk about the ocean and talk about solutions and issues that need to be addressed. So it's an exciting time. And after having survived COVID for 2 years, the festival went virtual. And we will be also doing a hybrid version of the film festival and offer the films virtually for 2 weeks after the in-person. So we have a large global audience, which we increased even more so during our virtual programming. And we are in 38 countries. We increased our audience by 40%. And it's just a great way for people to continue to watch films about the ocean. So we're very excited about coming back in April. We've been doing this for 19 years. Our mission is to connect people to the ocean and provide a platform for conversation, encourage people to become engaged, entertained as well, and educated about the ocean through independent film. We're primarily a volunteer-driven organization based in San Francisco, but we do have a very robust traveling program where we take the films overseas to various locations and across the United States. So the films continue to share their message with audiences around the world. I have to point out as well that we have a really amazing education program. We're celebrating our 10th annual education program where we bring in kids from the Bay Area to come into the theater and see the films for free. So we get about 1,500 kids, and it's just a room of chaos, but it's exciting because they get to meet the filmmakers and naturalists and scientists as well. And they start thinking of filmmaking or marine sciences as a career. And we also have a very exciting annual student film competition. So we invite kids from around the world to submit their films 5 minutes or less about the ocean. And we get participation from all over the world, and we get kids who show up to see their films on the big screen as well. So our goal is to inspire the next generation of ocean scientists. So, and we do that through film. So that's us in a nutshell. So let's get started. Again, thanks so much to everyone for joining us. I'm going to do a very brief intro of our panelists, but feel free to add more content. You all have amazing resumes and bios, and we're very excited to have you. So I'm going to start with our director. Leo Thom is the director of the film we're watching today, and he is completing an MA in wildlife filmmaking at UWE in association with the BBC's Natural History Unit. And he's looking to become a producer and director of natural history films. Leo is fun. We've done this before. He is a great expert on mangroves. He's also a part-time employee with the Mangrove Action Project. So thank you for joining us. And Leo joins us from the UK.
Thanks for having me. I think that's it. Nothing to add.
Also joining us is Alfredo Quattro. He is joining us from Port Angeles, which is west of Seattle. So he's in our time zone. And he has 40 years of experience in organizing and writing on the environment and human rights issues. And he is the co-founder of MAP, the Mangrove Action Project, as well as the former executive director. And he currently serves as MAP's international program director. So thank you for joining us, Alfredo. Oops, you're muted. You might want to unmute yourself. There you go.
Sorry. You hear me now?
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you for inviting me. Very
Thank
good.
you. And last but not least, we have Dr. Gretchen Kaufman, who is serving as our moderator. And this is really exciting. Gretchen not only has been volunteering with the festival for many years. Gretchen, I can't remember the exact number, but she is on the jury that selects the films, and she is responsible for introducing the Mangrove films to the film festival this year. So we really appreciate that. She is an ecology professor at the National University of Singapore and is a wetland restoration ecologist. And we are very excited to have her here. She is joining us from Singapore. She gets lots of kudos because it's 1 o'clock in the morning for her. And but she's just the perfect person to be moderating our show today. So thank you, Gretchen, for being here.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So thank you guys. Really, really appreciate it. As Erica said, we're going to show the film, and we're also going to show the trailer for the International Ocean Film Festival. It'll give everyone a little bit of an idea of the kinds of films that we screen, and it's always fun to share. From that, we'll go straight into the film. And then when we come back, Gretchen, I'll pass it off to you, and you can go ahead and get started. After that, and if anybody has any questions, please type them in the Q&A. And what I like for people to do is say, tell us where you're chiming in from. I know Salesforce has folks from all over. It's always curious to know exactly how global we are. So let us know where you're calling in from. So with that, I'm going to start our trailer. Thank you, everyone.
The coastal mangrove forest is really the buffer between land and sea, playing the critical role of protecting the land and coastal communities from storms, wind, and erosion. Growing in the tidal beach zone, a 100-meter deep forest can weaken the destructive forces of a tropical storm and reduce wave height by as much as 2/3. And with climate change, sea levels are rising and storms are becoming more intense. Our coastlines and their communities are more vulnerable than ever. As well as being nature shock absorbers, they've shaped the way people live on tropical coastlines for thousands of years, providing us with many essential goods and services. Mangrove forests are rich in biodiversity and are important nursery grounds for many commercial fish species. They supply firewood, building materials, medicines, and a wide variety of foods to local people, and provide other economic opportunities, such as ecotourism initiatives. Over the last 50 years, mangroves have depleted greatly. The #1 cause of destruction in Thailand, like other countries in Southeast Asia, has been shrimp aquaculture, which boomed from the mid-80s to the late 90s. At least half of the mangrove forest in Thailand have been completely lost, and a lot of what's remaining is degraded. Many shrimp farms are abandoned after just a few years. There are now successful, sustainable methods to restore abandoned ponds back into mangrove forests. Today, we're on Koh Klang. It's an island on the west coast of southern Thailand in the Krabi River estuary. It's a Ramsar site for its significant importance at a global level and is populated mostly by Muslim communities of small-scale fisher families. The low-lying island has a highest elevation of about 1 meter above sea level, making the 5,000 or so locals extremely vulnerable to any storm that hits the coast here, particularly in monsoon season. Also, erosion is happening very rapidly, especially on the exposed southern coastline, where land is being lost up to 3 meters per year.
ในด้านเชิงนโยบายเนี่ยเราเป็นทำหน้าที่ในการเชื่อมโยงระหว่างชุมชนนะคะองค์กรพัฒนาเอกชนแล้วก็ตัวเจ้าหน้าที่ของรัฐนะคะที่ให้มีการปรึกษาหารือกันให้มีการมานั่งพูดคุยกันนะคะเพื่อที่จะรับทราบรับฟังซึ่งกันและกันว่านโยบายที่ดีที่สุดหรือว่ารูปแบบการดำเนินการเรื่องการจัดการทรัพยากรที่ดีที่สุดเนี่ยควรจะเป็นรูปแบบไหนอย่างนี้ค่ะดังนั้นสิ่งที่เรา
Kun Nit has lived here all her life on the southern coast of the island, and she's had to relocate her house inland 5 times in the last 20 years. Her interest in mangroves grew as a result, and is now an active community representative spreading the importance of mangroves.
เมื่อก่อนจากที่ว่าตรงนี้หลังที่5หลังแรกก็กลับไปเกือบ500เมตรได้จากออกไปเขื่อนไม้ไผ่ตรงนู้นน่ะหลังแรกเราก็กระเถิบมาเรื่อยๆรู้สึกว่าหลังแรกกับหลังที่2ก็พอนานๆก็เริ่มเป็น100เมตรแล้วจนมาถึงหลังสุดท้ายเนี่ยก็คิดว่าคงจะกระเถิบไปไหนไม่ได้แล้วแหละเพราะเราไม่มีที่แล้วมีเท่านี้ถ้าไม่มีต้นไม้เราก็คงนอนไม่ค่อยหลับเท่าไหร่ผวาอยู่เรื่อยเพราะว่าเวลาคลื่นมันขึ้นสูงกว่าเขื่อนคอนกรีตนี่อีกหลังคาน่ะเวลามันโดนแต่เดี๋ยวนี้ไม่ถึงแล้วแหละขึ้นเขื่อนมาหน่อยๆไม่ถึงกับหลังคา
Like the rest of Thailand, Koh Klang experienced a huge loss of their mangrove forests, having been converted into shrimp farms.
ตัวมันเป็นคนแรกคุณบอกในอำเภอในจังหวัดอันนี้ตัวมันเป็นคนแรกเลยซึ่งปันนี้ได้มีเพื่อนอยู่คนนึงมีเพื่อนอยู่คนมันค่ายลูกกุ้งน้องมีเพื่อนอยู่คนค่ายลูกกุ้งมาถึงเจ้าตัวมันแกนู้นจะถาเปล่าเลยกันทั้งหมดเลยก็เห็นว่ากำเลยได้น้ำแก่ลานต้นนั้นน้นได้แก่ลานคุณแกตั้งบุญดูมาเช้ามาเช้าดีนายทุนก็ในตั้งบุญมาเช้าคุณบอกมันคุดกันหมดพอได้ปลาใจเดียนมันหมดเลยมันหมดด้วยอย่างนี้พอนายทุนลงมาเช้าเทในปีนี้ดาวนั้น
Intensive farming for profits led to widespread diseases, and contaminated farms were abandoned after just a few years. One of Imam's abandoned ponds is now a model restoration site for the IOFF project.
We have been restoring abandoned shrimp ponds back to mangroves, using a method called community-based ecological mangrove restoration. This holistic approach emphasizes restoring the hydrology of the site to facilitate natural mangrove regeneration. The restored hydrology ensures that every species will grow in its correct zone, creating a more biodiverse mangrove forest and avoiding the common problems of monoculture plantations.
Collaborating with communities is critical to the success of these projects. They provide physical help and local expertise and ideas. We add to their local knowledge with technical understanding and equipment. They are involved in all phases, from the planning stage through implementation to long-term monitoring and protection. This empowering process creates a sense of ownership for the long-term success of the project. Still in its early stages of restoration after 3 years, we are already seeing a lot of marine life come back. This has been very encouraging to people on the island.
แต่การทำมาหากินในป่าใหญ่เองมาขึ้นคนไล่คนเข้าไปหากินกันในป่าใหญ่เองอย่างเช่นพวกอะไรตกปูดำนี่ก็อยู่ได้เลยตกปูดำโลกุ้งว่างวันปลากระพง
As a coastal defense, restoring mangroves is more cost-effective than building and maintaining concrete seawalls, and overcomes many of the problems with artificial walls, such as accelerating erosion elsewhere as waves are deflected downshore, and standing seawater behind the walls when they are breached. A healthy mangrove ecosystem has hugely valuable unseen impacts. Their organic-rich soils have the ability to sequester 3 to 5 times more carbon per hectare than tropical rainforests. They also protect coral reefs by trapping sediments and absorbing nutrients from the water, maintaining the health of our oceans.
เราไม่ได้มุ่งหวังเพียงแค่เห็นความเปลี่ยนแปลงเชิงพื้นที่เนาะแต่เราต้องการเห็นการบูรณาการกันเป็นการ integration รวมกันระหว่างภาคส่วนของรัฐประชาชนนะคะที่จะต้องทำงานร่วมกันรวมถึงองค์กรพัฒนาเอกชนที่เข้ามาดูแลในพื้นที่ด้วย
Here, we are demonstrating the model of community-based ecological mangrove restoration at a small scale for others to follow at a larger scale. There are over 250,000 hectares of abandoned shrimp ponds across the coastlines of Southeast Asia, perhaps nearly double that around the world. Our vision is to restore these back into lush mangroves with the local people, greatly improving their lives, securing a more sustainable future, and ensuring the most effective protection from storms for generations to come.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you so much for showing that. Anna, you take it back over and then we can start the moderation.
Anna, did you want to go next or do you want me?
No, you go ahead, Gretchen. It's all yours.
Okay, great. Welcome everyone. My name is Gretchen Kaufman and it's the middle of the night for me. I'm here in Singapore grading. I'm a professor in the geography department, which is new to me. I was at University of San Francisco for 12 years teaching wetland ecology. So this is exactly what you just learned about in this film. And I'm not going to say very much about myself, except for that I moved to Singapore in the middle of the pandemic, and it's been very interesting. Here are some of the mangroves behind me. When it's daytime that I take my students to, we went on socially distanced field trips with masks on, got them out there, and they got really excited. So if you ever get a chance to go out into a mangrove forest, please do. And if you can help plant mangroves or trees of any kind, it's really an amazing opportunity, especially with community members. And my expertise is actually community-based wetland restoration. And so I work all over the region, and that's how I got here. And the reason I'm here with Anna today in the film festival is because I used to live in San Francisco and I've been working volunteering for 15 years there. So now I just want to turn it over to our filmmaker and the International Program and Policy Director and co-founder for a couple of questions. And I want to start with the filmmaker and end with the filmmaker because I feel like, you know, that's what we just watched. And so I'm going to ask Leo a first question and then kind of go back and forth. And then anyone else in the Q&A, I'll get to your questions very soon as well. And because we only have, it looks like about 25 minutes left, let's just try to keep our questions, you know, short and sweet, I guess. And then if there are any follow-up ones, we'll answer those. So first, Leo, I wanted to ask you what inspired you to work on the film? And I think I can't just ask you that because I'm also curious, how did you meet Alfredo and his team, Mangrove Action Project? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gretchen, and hello everyone. So yeah, in terms of the film, it was amazing to get like a small budget to go and make this film. And for me, what inspired me, you know, it was the first time I'd have the opportunity to go out and visit our amazing mangrove restoration sites in Thailand that Jim Enright was running. And to learn and see this methodology, go and check out this methodology of mangrove restoration called CBMR. Of course, it's all about collaborating with communities. So I was really keen to go and see the kind of impacts and the positive impacts it was having on the ground in the area, and to hear about the project from their perspective, you know, and that's who we're doing it for in the end. You know, it's for the communities. And I guess I was excited to go and see the way people live with mangroves as well. These communities, you know, they're totally dependent on the mangroves for their livelihoods. They're totally connected to the sea. Their whole life is based around the ocean. So that was wonderful. And of course, you know, the way they're protected by them. You saw in the film, obviously, the island of Koh Klang, that southern tip is still being eroded away as we speak, you know, every year, where the mangroves aren't. And then you've got the kind of, yeah, the crazy story of Kunit, who's had to move her home, you know, 5 times by over 500 meters. So that's kind of heartbreaking, but you know, these communities are super vulnerable, and the opportunity to kind of speak out for them, you know, I think it was an important thing to do. So, and my connection with the Mangrove Action Project, I was working and living in London, you know, very urban, and my background was in kind of animation, landscape architecture. So I just wanted to connect more with the natural world, did my research, and that's when I got in touch with Alfredo, and luckily for both of us, you know, we've been working together, which has been great.
Thanks so much, Leo, for sharing that adventure. Was that your first time to Thailand? Yeah.
It was the first time to Thailand,
Yeah.
and yeah, and also to the mangroves, actually, you know, or knowing it was a mangrove anyway.
Right, exactly. Sometimes we go there and don't even know. All right, thanks so much for that amazing answer. I didn't know any of that, actually. So Alfredo, I want to ask you a follow-up question now. As the co-founder of the Mangrove Action Project, MAP for short, you founded that in 1992. Can you describe the evolution of what Leo described us and we saw in the film as a community-based ecological mangrove restoration approach? And then just a side note, when did you decide to go from planting mangrove trees in rows? I've read your website and I know all about the strip planting method. My students actually thought that was an okay thing to present last week. So I had to send them the link to MAP and how to do it right. And because there's a lot of information out there about not using this method. Then when did you start working with communities? Yeah.
Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, it's a good question. We started working with communities right away, actually. When we started in 1992, one of our co-founders was Prasit Chansna from Yadphone Association in Thailand. He was in the Trong area of Thailand and worked in the communities. He had started something with the communities there, living in the mangrove areas, called Community Mangrove Forest, where the local community would actually manage their forest. They would replant mangroves or conserve the mangroves. And they were involved from the direct contact with the communities early on. MAP was involved with them through Prasit and his work. And so that was part of our makeup from the beginning, was working with local communities. Because we believed, as Prasit had taught us basically in his work, that we have to have the communities involved to be successful. We cannot let the communities that are living in those areas not be in touch with the resource management decisions. We later on got involved in mangrove restoration work, though. Early on, we were basically an advocacy group advocating against shrimp farming, trying to stop the spread of shrimp farms. That was one of our big projects we took on. And one of the quotes I want to mention was from a fisherman in a village in Andaman coast, who told us, he was the headman of a village, a young guy whose father was killed by the mafia. They call it the mafia of the shrimp farms, because he spoke out against shrimp farming. This young man told us that if there are no mangroves, the sea will have no meaning. It's like having a tree without roots, but the mangroves are the roots of the sea. And that quote is what inspired MAP to form initially. I want to let you know, I was a journalist traveling in southern Thailand, knew nothing about mangroves at the time, but I wrote about this article for Cultural Survival Quarterly. And I used this quote as an inspiration for starting MAP, basically. Prasit and I and Ian Baird co-founded the group. And we started going around the world trying to get more groups involved and joining us as a network. So we're basically a network at first. We get more involved actively later on in more than advocacy. We did education work through the marvelous mangrove curriculum we have. And then we got involved in restoration work later on as well. But 2010 or so, Robin Lewis joined us in helping to teach us how to restore mangroves. And he died a few years ago, unfortunately, but he was really an inspiration for MAP and many others. It was called the Ecological Mangrove Restoration Approach, which we use as our model. And so we went from that early on advocacy group and education to more actively involved in the field, and again involved in the community in that whole effort, getting involved in learning techniques of conservation and restoration.
What a fascinating story, Alfredo. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks.
I thought maybe the restoration had been going on the whole time and that's how you got involved. And so I've heard about that for a long time, but thank you for explaining that to everyone. And we have 3 amazing follow-up questions about the community. That's the most fascinating I find, is working with the community. So either Leo or Alfredo, I'm going to ask a couple of questions and they're all related to community. So I'll take the top one. So Kevin Smith is from Colorado, the mountains of Colorado, so far away from the mangroves. And he said, thanks for sharing. Are the economic opportunities, for example, new business opportunities for shrimp farmers to transition their ponds back into mangroves? What are those opportunities? And how do you get them? I guess the question is, how do you get them involved in your projects? Maybe.
Leo, you want to take that?
Yeah, I think I might start that one off. So obviously in the film you saw Bang Imam, who used to be a shrimp farmer, and so he turned his mangroves into a shrimp farm for a kind of quick profit, and it was really inspiring to see that he'd seen with his own eyes the destruction the shrimp farming business and industry in the 80s and 90s on the island had on the local people, the island, and so in the end he decided to turn his shrimp pond back into mangroves, which was great. And my understanding is that after 4 to 5 years, it's kind of intensive farming, and these are really kind of poor coastal communities where we're talking about. They were sort of taken away by the bright lights and the profits, and after about 4 years, the sort of area becomes so toxic that they can't even, that the shrimp don't even grow anymore. And part of this restoration, it's very much a long-term approach. And I guess in terms of economic benefits, it starts to bring back things like crabs, the fish, after the regenerating mangroves start to flourish. So that's one really important aspect. It is a long-term and difficult kind of long-term thinking approach that might not be so kind of straight away, but you have that coming back for their livelihoods, which is important. And I guess another project of ours this kind of relates to is the village of Nai Nang, and they're a neighboring village who are also doing mangrove conservation work with us since 2009, and they've actually grown. They've started kind of keeping bees as a way of linking that with their mangrove forest, so that the bees start pollinating their mangroves, and in the end it provides them a sort of alternative livelihood, of honey related products, and other community members start to get involved. So there's a women's group who make all the honey related products and stuff like that. So that's been a way they've been able to adapt, with their returning mangroves.
Thank you so much. It's a neat story about the beekeepers, and it's this women's group. And I actually wanted to buy some of the honey products, but they don't sell to strangers, I guess, outside of Thailand.
We'll have to go see Jim in Thailand.
I will. Well, I'm planning on going to the marine, taking my students, or going for a recce at least to the marine station in the Andaman Coast near Koh Ra, if you guys know where that is. Okay, so we have three more questions, and a lot about the shrimp farming. And so Andrea, Peter has 2 questions. So Andrea Hessenfeld asked, how do former shrimp farmers make their money? What economic activity? And I can just say what I learned from working with a couple of nonprofit organizations, including the film festival related to the ocean, is that something like 90 or 95% of the US's shrimp comes from these shrimp farms. So yeah, they're making a lot of money selling it to us to eat in the US. And then she also asked, how can these practices be replaced? And I'm gonna let Alfredo take that one. And if you don't have I had one other thing to mention about one of my projects, but Alfredo, why don't you tell us?
Yeah, well, shrimp farming has expanded greatly since 1992 when I was starting out. It really wiped out the mangroves in many countries, not just Thailand, but all over the world, including in South America and Central America. And the problem is it's basically raising a luxury food for export, where the local people are losing their livelihoods, losing their food sources locally, while we get shipped to us this luxury food, shrimp, all you can eat. And I often ask, how much can you stomach, when you realize the problems that it's causing locally? But the problem is most consumers don't understand the consumption demand they have, how it affects the rest of the world. We need to be more conscious about that, and that's a problem. It's really cheap. Shrimp is not cheap at all. It costs a lot. It's causing a lot of suffering worldwide. And so nowadays it's not as bad as it was before. There's less destructive mangrove loss, but it's still a problem. It's basically an industry like palm oil taking over a land, taking over an area where poor people live, or people that live, sustenance people live fishing or farming, and they're losing that ability to sustain themselves locally. And that's the problem that we want to try to address. And restoring the mangroves also means restoring a sense of management by the local communities where they can actually have security in managing their own resource.
Thank you so much, Alfredo. And I'll just add that I'm working on it's called a Roots to Reefs project, because I just wanted to answer specifically like how these people are now, if we're working on restoration together, getting funded. At least in our case, we're funding the local people. And I'm sure you guys are doing this too, Alfredo and Leo, but we're actually paying them to pick up the propagules, to take them into the nursery and plant them, because we're getting funding from a tree app online, because the grant funding is dried up. And I'm sure you're finding that too during the pandemic. And then they're planting them. And so they're taking care of the nursery. And then just like you guys, that we're monitoring the success of the survivorship of those trees. And so 2 locals, it's small scale now, 2 locals are getting paid full time for this project in Lombok, Indonesia. The big question is, how do we scale this up to bigger projects? And I didn't put that on my list to ask you guys, but maybe that's a good time right now. Alfredo.
We're trying to avoid planting by hand mangroves.
Right.
Sometimes they're not planted correctly. So we see about a 75% or more failure rate in current restoration, so-called restoration projects. By planting by hand, you have to make sure you're planting the right type of mangrove in the right place. And oftentimes they're using seagrass beds or mud flats to plant them in, which are not ecosystems meant for mangroves. And in fact, we're ruining effective ecosystems by planting a mangrove there. So most of the mangrove plantings we're talking about, we don't want to encourage communities to plant by hand. We want to encourage them to work on restoring the hydrology, conserving what they have. If they have to, they can plant by hand if they have to do that. But we want to make sure they do it in the right way. That's why there's education really needed in restoration work with mangroves, to avoid those failures that we're seeing over and over again.
That's a great point. We work hand in hand with our communities every day. So obviously I can't get there, but my collaborators are there working every single day together with them, which is really fun. And so, yeah, you can go visit some of these places, hopefully, as well. And I'll ask that question at the very end. I have Peter Horner that asked 2 questions about the communities as well. I think you've already answered his question about shrimp farming, how they devastated the mangroves in the 80s and 90s, especially in Thailand, and other parts of Southeast Asia, but Thailand and Bangkok just terribly. That's why you guys are working primarily there. And then he says, how was it stopped in the area? Is the area safe for resurgence? Not sure what you mean by that, but we can try. And then, have you created conservation area? That's a great question, because we're working in a marine protected area in Indonesia. And that's part of the involvement with the community, is to get the community to watch over the areas. So I'll hand that over to you. He also asked, what extent are you seeing local community support grow beyond the locals who are engaged on the hands-on work? Great questions. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't know the details in terms of there's a big problem with kind of ownership of these shrimp ponds, because they're still you know, owned by the kind of big corporations that sort of came in and bought these areas, and they've just kind of left it. And that was the kind of message that came out of, you know, at the end of the film, where actually, you know, we're looking at, I think there's Alfredo, you might have to correct me here, but, you know, we're looking at about 400,000 hectares of abandoned shrimp ponds. Like, that's a huge area, you know, almost the size of a small country around the world, just waiting to be restored, really. So but yeah, there are ownership issues, and that's really tricky. And I think the other side that I was kind of thinking, I'm just looking at the questions have popped away, but as well as you know, the planting and the regenerating forests, I think there's this kind of responsibility to conserve what's existing, because that's still disappearing as well. And you know, in some areas of the world, obviously the shrimp farming is reducing, but there's other pressures, and you know, it becomes about, like Alfredo said, and Gretchen, the education and working with the community, so they're taking pressure off their existing mangroves, you know, because there's still a lot of kind of logging and as we know, they're super poor areas, a lot of them. So that needs to be kind of that needs to be an approach as well.
Yeah, that's a really great answer to that question. I think the next best question now that I have for you is all about, I mean, I know we're running out of time here, but it's really important to talk about COP26. Okay. I know you guys are not in Glasgow, but there was just a UN big climate summit in Glasgow that I listened to every night in the middle of the night, because it was a very strange time difference. Maybe Leo had a better timing than me, but what I wanted to ask was about blue carbon. So they spoke about blue carbon in quite a few of the events that you could watch online. And some of you that are listening in might have heard of blue carbon, but could you one of you guys describe what it is and explain how mangrove restoration can help to mitigate climate change, both like you're talking about, Leo, you know, preserving the existing natural mangrove ecosystems, but also to restore them. And it doesn't have to be a super complicated answer, but just a little bit on blue carbon.
Yeah, so mangroves, you know, I think with the COP26 and more recently, you know, it's messages are coming out highlighting the importance of mangroves for climate adaptation, for a changing climate, you know, and these are kind of super tools. You know, the blue carbon that includes seagrass and coral reefs, you know, they're kind of super tools in our bid to fight against climate change. They're seen to store up to 5 times more carbon than inland rainforests. So they're being highlighted more and more, which is really good to see, you know, from events like COP26.
I wanted to mention that the idea of blue carbon is very important, but we have a hard time with the idea that we can use that only to save mangroves. It's like we need to have more ideas of how important mangroves are as an ecosystem for other reasons than storing carbon, for the biodiversity, for people's community life, for the oceans themselves to make them healthier, to stop erosion. But they do mitigate against climate change for sure, and we need to honor that. They store the carbon for thousands of years if they get a chance to store it. But if they're cut down and destroyed, they release that same carbon. So we want to see less removal of mangroves and more conservation of existing mangrove forests and restoring existing areas that were mangrove forests before.
Thank you so much. Yeah, blue carbon is one of the solutions for climate change, but it's pretty small. And I'm just hoping we can, Southeast Asia has an initiative between, now, I don't know, after COP26, but between Indonesia and Singapore, and they're coming up with a carbon market. So I'm hoping that we can, I'm talking to a bunch of people about how we can maybe restore more mangroves, get more funding for these large scale efforts. And Erica, I have a couple more questions that I really want to ask our filmmaker especially, but I also have 2 quick ones from Andrea and Peter. Do we have a few more minutes or do we need to finish in 1 minute?
Yeah, we can definitely extend on. I would say let's prioritize maybe the conversations for the filmmaker, and then we can wrap up with maybe any actions that we can take that you'd recommend for us to get involved. We're always looking for ways to get involved in our own communities or with additional programs that you all are really highly involved in that we can help support.
Yeah, we have those questions on the list, so definitely get to those in the last two, Peter and Andrea. Great, thanks for going a little bit longer. All right, so the next question is for Leo, really, is what is your next, next question is, what were the biggest challenges of filming? And as a wetland restoration ecologist myself, I know the biggest challenge, but I'm just curious what your biggest challenges were, because it's a wet, mucky, sticky, crocodile-laden ecosystem, right? Which is exciting for me, but not for everyone, and filmmakers especially.
Yeah. No, mangroves are super difficult terrains to get around, you know. Without the equipment, it's hot, it's sticky, it's super muddy, and just trying to keep all the equipment kind of dry and getting mud off the lenses, you know, that was definitely a challenge. And one thing, you know, that I didn't realize until I got there was how important the kind of tides were as well. You know, the local people would know the tide times like it was a kind of weather report, and you know, it kind of influenced when you could get to certain areas in the mangroves, and also kind of boats getting stuck when the tides went down and you get kind of stuck in channels. So yeah, I definitely had to, I remember having to change my kind of shooting schedule before we got going.
And then you got mosquitoes and dengue fever last time I went to Borneo. I got dengue, yeah.
Absolutely, that's it. And maybe
about
for this
crocodiles,
film,
any crocodile stories?
Well, I've got a film plan to go to the Sundarban in Bangladesh and India, actually. So hopefully I'll make it back as well. There's crocodiles.
Hopefully you'll see some tigers. The tigers
Yeah.
hang out there. I can't wait to get there. Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, so then I just wanted to see one more for Alfredo, or for either of you guys. How many projects do you guys have going on?
Well, worldwide, we have several projects that are still pending because of COVID. We've had a virtual trainings, for instance, for CBEMR and the curriculum as well. But we have projects going on in Cayman Islands. There's the Mangrove Rangers that was formed by Martin Keeley and his efforts there. And El Salvador, we have a project pending to do a large restoration there, working with local groups there. Africa, we have several projects possibly in the coast of Africa. So we're east coast of Africa, Tanzania and Kenya. But Bangladesh as well is another project pending. But all these are pending, and funding is a big issue. We're always looking for grants and trying to get funding. But more, we're looking for the opportunity to travel again, if we can, to go to the sites in person. It's kind of difficult to judge a site by virtual. So it's important to be there in person as well. So that's one of our challenges today.
Are these organizations coming to you and because you have this great website and all these films? And that was actually a question I was going to ask you. What was your the goal of your map, this film that you just did? Was that to maybe spread the news about this type of restoration?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think you know, the aim of the video, as well as to illustrate the importance of mangroves, you know, on the local communities, it was definitely to get out the communicate the messages behind the methodology, you know, collaborating with communities when doing restoration work, and the importance of kind of natural regeneration as well. You know, obviously, you know, the planting is great, but also nature can plant, you know, a lot kind of better than humans can, and it ensures a rich variety of species to return, you know, both flora and fauna. So it's all about biodiversity, and yeah, it was definitely to kind of to try and communicate the messages of CBMR, and hopefully it spreads more and more, and you know, people are working with communities, and that's great. So we just want to keep spreading that message.
I just thought you were only in Thailand, so I'm so impressed that Alfredo says you're all over the world, or trying to get all over the world. That's great.
Yeah, we're definitely a kind of global group. We've got people dotted about, but a lot of what we are doing now, as Alfredo mentioned, is kind of this remote remote training, you know, so training the trainers and working with organizations such as Wetlands International and the Global Mangrove Alliance, WWF, you know, we're kind of training people on the ground there to try and keep that, spreading.
So 2 quick follow-up questions. Peter, thank you again. He says, what is the alternative to planting by hand, natural seeding, or some other way to plant? So maybe the way that you guys are doing it, at least. Yeah.
We try to restore the hydrology of the area so the natural seedlings can actually come in. That's how natural seedlings actually plant themselves in a sense, but you have more biodiversity that way. Most of the planting programs are planting one variety of mangrove, usually the Rhizophora or the red mangrove. And it's not really going to be a full mangrove forest. It'll be basically a plantation. That's why we're seeing a lot of these projects as failures as well. And sometimes they will plant more than one variety, but usually just one. And so we're trying to restore the hydrology to allow the natural seedlings nearby to come into that area and recolonize the area. That helps have a more biodiverse and long-term success.
Great.
Awesome. And Gretchen, let's how about we do one more question and kind of wrap with initiatives, and we can go from there.
Exactly. 2 more questions. I have the last one for Leo, our filmmaker. I always like to ask this at the end. What is your next film project? Are you following the community in Thailand, and any updates?
Yeah. So funnily enough, I'm actually due to go back to Koh Klang and go and film Kunit early next year. So she's I mentioned that the neighboring village Nai Nang, who are almost like they've become a kind of beekeeping village. You know, they've been restoring their mangroves and kind of combining the working with bees, you know, to protect to keep pollinating their forests and to keep that going. So basically, Kunit is getting beekeeping training. So the idea of the film is to follow her journey to find out about beekeeping, because she's a big advocate for mangroves, and obviously with her past, you know, mangroves are super important to her, and she's just found out about the beekeeping. So this training's happening. So the idea is to go and film and to follow what happens and actually you know, in the end attempt to basically reintroduce these stingless bees that are abundant on the island back into the mangroves to keep them kind of regenerating and flourishing.
Just a quick point, they're native stingless bees, right? They're native. That's really
native.
Important.
Absolutely. I think there's they're working with these endemic species of stingless bees. Yeah.
And the other point is that they're making money off of the honey, so that's super important for their local sustainable livelihoods.
Yeah, and they've really just taken this on as well. It's completely, we've been sort of facilitating, but it's great to see the community kind of take ownership and really drive this, and it's definitely a community-led thing. So that's you know, that's really good to see.
Thank you. I'll hand it over to Erica now. I know she's I thought we had an hour. Sorry, Erica. So I planned for an hour. So I tried to go as fast as I could. I'm 5 minutes over. Sorry. But you have 2 other questions in the chat if you wanted to ask those. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you all so much. This was an amazing presentation today. Not only is it awesome to learn more about mangroves, but it's awesome to connect that creative component too. For a lot of folks at Salesforce, they kind of blend those worlds in kind of a different context, but it's fun to hear it from kind of this nature-based solutions perspective. So as we wrap it up today, we'd love to hear any additional thoughts that you might have on how we can get involved or ways that we can help support organizations and more creative endeavors that y'all are working on today.
I could promote our calendar here. So this art calendar that we put out every year. It's the 20th anniversary of this, and it's got artwork from around the world. And we try to get this promoted as a way to raise money for mangrove work we do, but also get the local children involved in local areas that they work on mangrove forest. And so this contest is for children from 5 years old to 16 or so, and has a lot of beautiful artwork in it, including the cover. So get a calendar if you like. Also go to our website at www.mangroveactionproject.org and see what we're doing. We have a lot of good information there. Leo, you have more to add that?
No. You know, if you know, you're thinking kind of bigger than that and thinking about supporting certain projects, obviously we'd be absolutely delighted to kind of chat about some of these projects we've got upcoming and you know, for when we get back into the mangroves. And yeah, we'd love to keep spreading these projects and messages.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I will collect kind of all these resources that were mentioned today and share it in our Slack channel for Oceanforce. So look out for that for a message from our team. And then as we're wrapping up here, we can go ahead and stop recording and I'll pass it back to Anna to have any final words.
And I just wanted to say something really quickly because we are working with MAP on our Lombok, Indonesia project, and they're already taking volunteers right now. And there's a VTL from Singapore there. So I'm gonna go on my next break and plant mangroves, because if you do work directly with communities like we do, we plant them in the right places. So you can do planting, it's just not advisable if you're have huge areas and leaving it up to the community, but we're working very closely with them. So it's a neat community-based effort that you can actually go and scuba dive and plant. And so hopefully Alfredo and Leo, I forgot to ask you guys about that, but if you can figure out some options for people when COVID, you know, restrictions kind of loosen up, if they could go and help with the communities. People like to do that on their, like, you know, ecotourism vacations, right?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Gretchen. And thank you, Alfredo and Leo, for joining us for such an interesting conversation. And Gretchen, what an amazing job you do moderating. Your enthusiasm is infectious and inspiring. So thank you for that. And to everyone at Salesforce who joined us, fantastic questions. We hope we get a chance to do this again. We've got lots of films we could share with you. And this is such a great and convenient way to help teach about the ocean and bring up certain issues and figure out what we can all do to help protect our ocean. So thank you so much, Erica. And again, the festival is April 7 to 10. I have no shame next year at Fort Mason here in San Francisco. So thanks again. And I look forward to seeing everyone again soon. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, moderators. Thanks, team.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.